Welcome to Progress Post, a channel where you get opinions upfront on multiple issues of concern to everyone. I'm Dev Kumar, and today we'll look into a very interesting and intriguing comparison between war-torn Ukraine and strife-ridden Pakistan, and how the ruling elites in both these countries perpetuate a vicious, racist and purist agenda against their eastern neighbors, Russia and India respectively. Right then, let's get started with the topic at hand and see what comes out of it. If you haven't subscribed to Progress Post as yet, then please do so for in-depth analysis of lesser-known topics of high importance from around the world. Do watch the video till the end. It's time for part 2 of the post, Shocking Similarities between Ukraine and Pakistan. In part 1, we mostly saw the Ukrainian side of the similarities. In this post, we shall see the Pakistani side of how these similarities play out. Between 2014 and 2022, the government in Kiev, led by neo-Nazis, unleashed a reign of terror on the large Russian minority in eastern Ukraine, and up until the eve of the Russian invasion in February 2022, had massacred over 15,000 innocent Ukrainians of Russian origin. The consequence of this is right there in front of us. Russia invaded Ukraine as expected, and after a year and a half of a bloody attritional war, more than half of Ukraine is totally destroyed, and more than half its population has left the country and taken refuge in neighboring EU countries. As things stand now, Russia is in total control of over a fourth of Ukraine, covering areas where the overwhelming population is Russian. What Ukraine will come out of the war looking like is the big question today. Whether it will survive as a nation is also being questioned. Racism destroyed Hitler's Germany. It destroyed Western colonial imperialism post-Second World War. It destroyed white power and the system of apartheid in South Africa. And it's now destroying Ukraine. Nobody is prepared to put up with such lunatic racist ideology anymore. Next, it could be Pakistan's turn, unless it changes course. The racist and xenophobic hatred of Russians brewing inside the neo-Nazi ruling elites of Ukraine has a visible historical connection to the original Nazis, as we have already seen. But what's the source of the pathological hatred of Hindus among the ruling elites of Pakistan? Quite clearly, the source of this hatred is found in the medieval history of India, when large parts of the country were occupied by the invading forces of Islam from the Middle East. From 1192 AD right up to 1707 AD, a large part of India, including most of North India, came under the rule of the Muslim sultans and badshahs, or emperors. During this 500-year period, the Muslim rule failed to band India or convert it into an Islamic society as they had done elsewhere in the world. Whatever headway Islam could make in India became the seed of discord within the country and eventually grew into the movement for a separate nation for the Muslims of India in the 20th century called Pakistan, which means land of the pure. This is obviously quite exclusivist and racist in scope and implication. Now, what was the need for creating a land of the pure? Apparently because India, being a non-Islamic and Hindu country, is perceived by the Muslim elites as an impure and infidel country. So break it first and turn the separated part into a totally Muslim nation, which Pakistan managed to achieve within a few decades after its creation. Thereafter, work like termites from within to undermine the Hindu majority in India and turn it into an Islamic state, which is what is being attempted currently. Now, you might be thinking this is more religious than racist. But hang on, the religious agenda here is ostensibly the convenient cover for what lies underneath. There is no dearth of public pronouncements by the Muslim leadership of Pakistan about how Muslims ruled India for 500 years and how they kept the, quote, small, weak and dark-skinned Hindus, unquote, under their heels through this entire period. The reference to small, weak and dark-skinned Hindus comes from the belief of the Muslim elites of the Indian subcontinent and especially those in Pakistan, that they are descendants of the invading Arabs, Turks and Persians who, in their opinion, were fair-skinned, stronger, taller, etc. However, scientific DNA tests show that the facts on the ground are different. 90% of the Muslims of the Indian subcontinent are descendants of Hindus who were converted to Islam, and just about 10% of the Muslim elites could possibly trace part of their origins to these foreign invaders. Even then, we all know that this whole business of fair-skinned, stronger, taller, etc. is nothing but a load of rubbish. India is a richly diverse country where you find people with different types of physical appearances that range from Middle Eastern to Central and East Asian and on to Australasian and many others in between. However, there are striking similarities in the DNA of Indians across all these varying physical features. The false narrative of racial superiority mixed with the dogmatic narrative of jihad is being relentlessly bombarded on the uneducated and semi-educated masses of Pakistan. They are told endlessly that their Allah has made Pakistan for them so that they can accomplish the unfinished task of the medieval Muslim invaders to win against India and Islamize it completely. This objective is articulated in Arabic as Ghazwa-e-Hind. There never was a country in existence called Pakistan before 1947 when India was partitioned. Similarly, there was also never any independent country called Ukraine in existence before 1991 when the Soviet Union, an avatar of historical Russia, disintegrated. If on one side, the neo-Nazi ruling group in Ukraine idolizes Hitler, on the other side, the racist and purist Pakistani elites idolize the Arab and Turk invaders who unleashed death and destruction on the Hindu natives of India on a scale which is unparalleled anywhere else on the planet. Just as the Ukrainian neo-Nazi elites consider the Russians as low-life vermin who should be wiped out, the elites in Pakistan also look down on Hindus as impure and infidel, low-life people who should be enslaved and wiped out. This isn't just an ideology in Pakistan, but they have actually walked the talk. Ever since its creation in 1947, Pakistan has all but wiped out its Hindu minority from being 26% of the population in 1947 down to around 1% today. And even this 1% is being subjected to all the atrocities that wiped out the 25% earlier. The neo-Nazis of Ukraine also wanted to wipe out the 40% Russian minority completely and unleashed a genocidal war against them in 2014 when they grabbed power through the Maidan coup. As I mentioned earlier, they massacred over 15,000 innocent ethnic Russians across eastern Ukraine between 2014 and 2022, and that finally resulted in the fratricidal war that's currently underway in that country. Earlier in 1971, India had to intervene in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, where the Pakistani elites had unleashed a genocidal war against the Bengali population there and targeted the Hindu segment in particular. According to most estimates, the total number of people slaughtered were over 3.2 million, of which over 80% were Hindus. Following India's intervention and the war thereafter, the Pakistani army was routed and Bangladesh emerged as an independent nation. Several examples of racist slurs and expressions against Bengalis by Pakistani elites came up on public domain during the period running up to the India-Pakistan War in 1971. During this period, one of the oft-repeated racist slurs used by the Pakistanis against Bengalis was, quote, lowly people of the lowlands, unquote. Another shocking outrage was the premeditated mass rape of Bengali women, both Muslim and Hindu, numbering over 500,000 by the Pakistani army and its vigilante wing, the Razakars, with the stated objective of changing the gene pool of East Pakistan by diluting the Bengali genes. Such was the level of racial hatred of Bengalis among the Pakistani elites. I don't know of any other parallel of such shameful and disgraceful conduct at this scale anywhere else in recorded human history. This is something that even the neo-Nazis of Ukraine may not have contemplated yet. But racial hatred and xenophobia can take people to extremes of depravity. Thankfully, this war in Ukraine has all but wiped out the clout of the neo-Nazis in the country, and by the time it gets over, nothing would be left of the neo-Nazi fetish of the Ukrainians. Now let's look up the other instances of anti-Hindu, racist pronouncements from Pakistan at different points of time. Prior to the 1965 India-Pakistan War, the then dictator of Pakistan, General Ayub Khan, was quoted as saying, "One Pakistani soldier is equal to 10 Indian soldiers." Within 17 days of the war, Pakistan ran out of gas and begged its patron, the United States, to work out a face-saving truce. That's how comical it gets. The germ of racism hasn't quite left the psyche of the Pakistani elites even after their false and misplaced racist supremacy theory failed on the battleground against supposedly weaker and inferior Indians. For instance, even well-meaning Pakistanis, when decrying the horror of the genocide of Bengalis in East Pakistan, don't hesitate to use expressions like, quote, "Poor Bengalis, it's not their fault that they are small, dark and weak. They're also humans, aren't they?" Unquote. Now, it's not clear whether these well-meaning Pakistanis realize the annoyance that their patronizing assertions cause among Bengalis in general. Maybe they don't give a damn, which is fine. Another instance of such racial nonsense in Pakistan came up during a TV discussion on a Pakistani channel soon after the 26/11 terrorist attack in Mumbai. One of the panelists proclaimed, quote, "He looks like a Hindu," unquote, in reference to the lone Pakistani terrorist named Ajmal Kasab, caught alive by Indian police during this terrorist attack. Now, Kasab was of short stature and had the regular brown skin that most people in the Indian subcontinent, including Pakistan, had. What this crook in the TV station implied was, how can Kasab be a Pakistani? Pakistanis are taller and fairer people. Well, Kasab certainly didn't look like that. Here's another instance of racist slur by another prominent Pakistani, a former cricket star and now a former prime minister. He claims to be a Pathan and had reportedly told an Indian journalist during his cricket playing days that Pathans have been coming down south to India to flirt with Indian women since ages. There's always an emphasis on the term South for India and to project Pakistan as some kind of a northern or Central Asian country closer to white Europe. Such is their obsession with the need to present themselves as some kind of a fair-skinned race which is different from Indians. It's actually quite comical. Racial hatred of a peer group of humans can lead people to bizarre extremes. Hitler and his Nazi thugs had gone berserk with their false sense of racial pride. They stole the holy swastika sign of the Hindus, twisted it around, blackened it from red, and presented it as something original that they thought up. Then they stole the Hindu term Arya, meaning a well-groomed individual with no reference to race or ethnicity whatsoever, and began calling themselves Aryan, the master race, or some such nonsense. Similarly, hatred of Hindus have led the Pakistani elites to think up a bizarre mixture of falsehoods about their racial background, which they alternately juggle between Arab, Turk and Persian, depending on which one of these suit their lies and false narratives best at any given point of time. Hatred of India and the overwhelming majority of her people, the Hindus, have led Pakistan to overspend on its military. Over time, this expenditure became unsustainable even as serious questions about its proper utilization and ROI come up in the face of rampant graft and corruption leading to embezzlement of funds by the very military leadership that swears by the security of Pakistan. This is somewhat of a comedy for those watching from the outside. The same graft and corruption afflicts Ukraine as well, and there is no dearth of information on public domain about how the ruling elites in Ukraine siphon away the country's wealth. Currently, Ukraine cannot run even for a week without outside financial assistance. In fact, if the United States stops military aid to Ukraine, the war would simply be over within a few days, as the Russian forces would overrun it in no time. The big question that the average Ukrainian should ask himself or herself is, was it right to adopt the irrational xenophobia about Russia by following the persuasion of the neo-Nazi fringe in Ukraine's political landscape? Was it worth it? Most importantly, where does Ukraine go from here? Can it outlast the war? And if it does, what would it look like coming out of this devastating attritional war with a military superpower against which even the United States itself won't dare to go to war? All the hatred for Russians have boomeranged on the Ukrainians, and now it's too late to save their country from total destruction. Pakistan, on the other hand, hasn't quite reached that stage for the simple reason that it hasn't gone to war against India ever since its humiliating defeat in the Kargil War at the turn of the millennium in 1999-2000. The hatred for Hindus has driven Pakistan to financial bankruptcy and socio-economic underdevelopment of sub-Saharan levels from which it cannot come out with its current set of credentials. The hate-mongering against Hindus in Pakistan is primarily driven by its Islamic clergy, which has a strong influence over the nation's feudal polity and the all-powerful military. The military leadership is nose-deep in graft and corruption and eats away all of the resources of the country, even as the poverty-stricken masses go deeper into the spell of the clergy. At the same time, Pakistan faces serious separatist movements in all of its non-Punjabi regions, and as a result, it doesn't need more than a little nudge from interested foreign powers to bring about the country's total disintegration and collapse. There's very little time for the elites in Pakistan to sort out the problem in the grey matter between their ears. They can still make a course correction and turn the fortune of their country. Better late than never. We'll wind up this post here. If you haven't subscribed to Progress Post yet, then please do subscribe now. And if you have watched the post this far, then you would have surely found it interesting. So please like and share it as well. Thank you.